Welcome back to another Conscious Experience podcast. My name is Boris Kirchner. Today I am with my brother Mike, and we are talking about signs and stages of spiritual awakening, the very core of what we're doing here on planet Earth.
Mm-hmm. This is an interesting subject because it's not like we spent weeks researching how to present this, and there's obviously multiple facets of this topic of awakening, and I believe everybody has their own journey, but we will see what flows, and let's get started. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I want to explore this both from the point of view of somebody's like on the journey, because that's what we are. We're here on the journey with you, exploring it through the experiment of our own life. And also, of course, drawing from like the various experiences and traditions and teachings and different things that we were exposed to that, deeply resonated with us. So I'm really excited for this topic.
Awesome. Let's kick it off. So, Boris, what is a spiritual awakening? What do you think it means to have a spiritual awakening?
Yeah. So I'd say spiritual awakening is a shift in perception. It's a shift in how we perceive ourselves, the other being any other, be your friend, your lover, your wife, your husband, your dad, mom, dogs, governments, ideas, so whatever that sense of an other is. And also a shift in the way that we see world or life or this isness that we live in. So I think it's fundamentally a shift in perception at each one of these levels, self, other, and world, that gives rise to a completely different narrative and context for life.
Mm-hmm. I like that. That actually reminds me of the first time I would say I called it a epiphany at the time. That's not so much a spiritual word, but that's kind of what my definition is. And now that you said that, I would say a spiritual awakening is when you realize that what you've known to be your whole life of the five senses, which is all apparently out here, actually resides within. And so I would say a spiritual path is one that moves inwards first, at least on one level, rather than what we've known to be this materialistic world. I remember the first time I had that epiphany or that spiritual awakening, I was sitting in a car with our mutual friend, Sunny. And I was at that time, many years, like 15 years ago, I was really into space. And like, I was like, wow, what's out there? Like the infinite vastness of space, like aliens and conspiracy theories. And then we're just sitting in the car. And then Sunny's like, you know what's just as vast, but like not out there? He's like, if you go inwards. In that moment, I know it sounds very basic, but like 15 years ago, I don't know, like we didn't really have so much like social media or YouTube and so that was the first time I was like, wow, he's right. There's an infinite world within. And I remember driving home and like everything changed. Like you said, it's a shift in perspective. I was like, really? So everything out here, like the traffic lights, everything that I've known to be like out there is actually something that's within. And I was like, how is that possible? So that's how I dove into like quantum physics at that time to try to explain like, what does that even mean? And it does all make sense. So that was my spiritual awakening. Do you remember yours? The first time you would say you had a spiritual awakening?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I just want to just say like there are spiritual awakenings that continue to happen throughout life. I do want to say though, in my experience, in my sense of this, they are not infinite. It's not like there is an infinite set of awakening. It is that there is an absolute state that we are waking back up to. There is a reality. So it's not that there's just an infinite dream that you just have infinite awakenings. But I think there is that space of coming home and that sense of, okay, there is a waking up. And then there's also many ways that we wake up within the various constructs of our life. So we may have an awakening about like what relationship means or seeing ourselves in a new way in relationship. So it's really like just this shift. It's like life was always this way. Okay. And I have this way of like navigating, and that's what everything means. And if this happens and that happens, and then suddenly pop in that little bubble that you thought was the whole world and you thought that applied to everybody and everything, suddenly is like, what? That doesn't even apply to me. Wow. Like, and you are now in some degree, you have had an experience where you went from a dream being something that seemed very real, very solid, very confirmed, very like intrinsic in what it is, to suddenly seeing, oh my God, actually, I was mistaken. That was an illusion. My sense, that whole sense of reality and permanence that had for me, it was illusory. What else is illusory? Like, what else, in what other area of my life am I asleep in this way? Asleep in my own opinions, asleep in my own kind of whatever dogma I adopted, whatever thing I came up with. And now that forms the very basis of what I think reality is. So I would say that, yeah, there's many that we can awaken many times on a single subject. We can also awaken in the sense of like that grand scheme of like fundamental change to self, other and world. Um, and I also have heard about these experiences of like instant enlightenment, like somebody waking up all the way through the entire thing, sometimes being dysfunctional afterwards, because it's like you suddenly realize that none of this is not even life. This is just like a thought experiment that God is having. Um, so anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent, but my own awakenings, I mean, they continue to unfold in very beautiful ways. But like the one that is most alive in me, of course, is like I kind of call it my initiation into spirituality. And it took place at these crossroads of my mom having just passed away. I was 18. She was like 36, I believe, maybe 38. She was very young also. And that broke my world. And this is another way that awakening comes. It's not just like, oh, I have a really cool insight, I read a cool book, or I had like a funky meditation or a psychedelic trip. But instead, it's just like, wow, like you think life is like this. You have your mom forever, you have your whatever partner forever, and then suddenly there's nobody there. And that could be a cataclysmic shift for that well-structured permanent world that we assume we are living inside. And so for me, that was the big rock kind of like bottom experience that threw me into all kinds of ways of trying to self-medicate and cope and distract. And I had no guidance, no conscious guidance whatsoever as to how to navigate the feelings and the experiences that I was going through, or what they meant, or how to contextualize them. So it was literally like this 18-year-old forming kind of brain, trying to figure out life, trying to individuate, and then at the same time having this sense that the world is now gone, that I was expecting to be there for my whole life. And that was a really powerful moment where I literally just had a transcendent experience. This crossroads, as I was saying, of like deep pain, but also psychedelics, and also nature, and also synchronicity. And Eckhart Tolle was a part of that. This like incredible synchronicities with my books and friends, and everything just like fell together, as it often does in retrospect, to give me a timeless experience of literally feeling like I could see life from an eagle's eye point of view, versus like this ant-like point of view, which is what we experience, I would say, as human beings, typically very, very short-sighted kind of experience. And in that, I just saw the tapestry of life looking so beautiful. Even all of those things that were accidents, like my mom passing away, I had this incredible communion with her. And I saw that life is just perfect, exactly the way it is. And no accident, no death, no loss was ever possible. And this came through not as a thought, but as an experience, like as like a felt sense, like, whoa, it's like that. Oh my God, all the struggle in life is over. We won. And then over the course of like, a week or two, it slowly like that space faded, that like the deep connection faded out. And it was just this like memory. But really what happened in the context of our conversation is that like, there was something of like this like soul kind of like eye-opening experiences, like, and then it's falling back asleep, and in the sleep, the soul is like me. But in those moments, it was itself, and it had this, connection and perspective that was so much vaster than I can, consciously compute. So yeah, that was probably one of my biggest touchstones in life.
Mm, amazing. So yeah, we will do another episode on like the Alzheimer's or the forgetting that happens after you have a spiritual awakening, a very normal process. Um, so yeah, like you were saying, spiritual awakenings are not surface level per se, meaning like it's not typically like you read a book and then you're like, well, I haven't, you could call that something else, like and maybe like an epiphany or something like more in the thought realms. They're really a changing of a deep, 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 deep seated belief that sometimes you don't even know you had, like
Mm.
that you think that as a child, you don't know that people die. Like you don't really experience death until you do experience death. And then you have to have that question, or something like a deep belief in something like God, right? It's not like a deep belief in how relationships work, even though relationships can be definitely spiritually awakening, right? Realizing that like all this like outward anger in front of something that's just like there is coming from within. That's an amazing one as well. So what would you say? And we also talked about like how it can be painful. So one of the questions was, what does it feel like to have a spiritual awakening? Does it always have to be through pain and suffering, or does it sometimes come through grace? Where do you think it like comes from, spiritual awakenings?
I think those are really the two. It's like, well, the two are one. I think it's grace, but sometimes the grace is fierce grace, and sometimes it feels like the kind of grace that we might expect from like some kind of good feeling movie. But
So in your case, it was pretty fierce, right? A death.
yeah, well, it was. And at the same time, it was incredible mercy, because I was in this like almost like bipolar kind of depression, like swinging from like feeling deeply depressed and crying and feeling this incredible loss to getting so angry and furious and enraged about life and God and like what, what all this means. And so it scooped me out of that, this experience, and like showed me, hey, it's not quite like how you think it is, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to also, like, before we go like deeper into, um like the actual experience of like what happens when you have a spiritual awakening subjectively, I just want to qualify this with one more angle. It's like, what are we really talking about? Like, what are we waking up to, right? Because we can talk about like what is enlightenment and spiritual awakening and satori and all of this. What are you actually seeing? What is changing? And the thing is that it's primarily a shift from um, identifying with things that are temporal, things that like are coming and going, appearing and disappearing. In the scriptures, it's called appearances. It says, "Judge not by appearances," right? You be judged. You judge falsely. Um, and so appearances are those things that are they can't actually be counted for on. They might be here today and they're going to be gone tomorrow. And so when we're talking about spiritual enlightenment, we're seeking for that identity that doesn't leave, that doesn't change, that doesn't go anywhere, doesn't come and go. Even our body comes and goes, right? Like in our deep sleep, you have no body, and in your dream state, you have all kinds of other bodies. So it's like this experience is not that permanent. So what is it, right? And we search and we seek, and we or it's revealed to us, what is that identity that never changes? What is true about myself that never changes? And then what is true about you, the other, that never changes? And there we start to like have the revelation of oneness. And then what is true about the world, that never changes? Well, actually, the world, like, what is the real world? Here, this world that we know is always changing. So it is really this search or this opening to what is the reality, like what is fully and always dependable, what is eternal, what is eternal life, what is that even talking about? So we're not just really talking about like knowing about something like objectively. We're talking about discovering experientially that eternal infinite aspect of life, which is present right here where we are. So that is like, I just want to qualify our search is not just like a shift in perception about stuff, but also this movement towards what is called the absolute, in the sense that's why awakening is not infinite. It's like you wake up to that which is always and already so and present and is. So the inner experience of spiritual awakening, this is subjective experience, is primarily one where there is a lessening of investment and belief and value in all of the changing aspects of life. Like I knocked off a glass here, it spilled, there's stuff, or there's some kind of loss. At a certain level where a consciousness is deeply identified with, that's my glass, I spend that much money on it, or let's say it's not a glass, let's say it's my expensive watch, or it's some other prized item, whatever it is, there is a sense of loss, like personal loss, because as we start in the dream, we are deeply identified with all of the possessions of the dream character, the body of the dream character. Like, it literally feels like this is our life, period. Just like as if you were to go into a computer game and you're playing Mario or whatever, and you just like are convinced now, you fell asleep and you're now Mario, and that is your cart, and Bowser better not touch it. Like that is what happens to us as consciousness, as we are born and we experience ourselves growing as a child. We essentially give up all of our omnipotence. We give up all of our power because we are born as a fresh little baby, and we are, for the first whole bunch of months and years, conditioned to completely be dependent on something outside of ourselves entirely, which is our parents. Because our parents don't give us love, we die. They don't give us food, we die. They don't give us drink, we die. And so we go into this conditioning and we come out deeply identified as the character. And now we have our next stage, which is like, well, who am I really? Right. And so one of the shifts, one of the signs of awakening is essentially this experience where it's like you go from that deep sense of identification with all of these temporal material aspects of life, and you start to feel like, oh, there's something else. There's somewhere else that I can put my trust, my sense of well-being, and it's almost as if like a snail is pulling itself back into its thing. And it's like you start to really feel like, wow, it's something within me. There's something within me. I don't need to have that item be out here to validate me in any kind of way. And so one of the things that keeps happening is that you start to become more and more okay or accepting of things as they are. But then it shifts to even next level of it, which is like you realize that everything that happens is for your own highest benefit, that this dream is intelligent, that it's actually helping you awaken, that and there's a whole nother journey then that starts where you are collaborating with all of life and feeling like whatever is coming to me is the way. It's perfect. This is exactly my unique curriculum. So I'll pause there, but I feel like this is kind of one of the transitions. It's transition of what we truly value, what we give value to, what we really identify with, and that starts to shift, and it starts to shift the way we feel.
Nice. And yeah, thank you for setting the stage as to what I guess the core is of what we're talking about, which is this absolute permanence in this impermanent world. I believe there's many ways that people feel when they have a spiritual awakening. We will touch in on the maybe the darker sides of spiritual awakening after, but I can think of 3 quote unquote feelings that people may or may not have, or probably will have when they have a real deep spiritual awakening. One of them is awe and wonder. And so it's like, what are they awful and wondering about? Well, they're like, their jaw drops in awe and wonder of something that is much bigger than what they thought was previous, which is typically themselves. So once they have this realization of this universal connectedness amongst many things, it's like, wow. And there's this like childlike wonder that comes back in again. Another thing that happened, and it was quite vivid experience for me the first time I experienced this, is laughter. There's a famous quote that Buddha would always tilt his head up to the sky and laugh. And I never experienced that till one day and I don't remember what kicked it off, other than I think I was chanting on my way to work. I worked at a corporate job many, many years ago, and I was chanting all the way to work. And then I park in the parking lot, and I forget what I thought about, but I just looked up in the sky and just started laughing. And I think that that is just, what are you laughing at? You're laughing at the ridiculousness of what most people think the world is. And that, I think that realization of what is true and eternal. And then the third thing I think people can feel is abundance. So moving from something that is scarce, which is contractive in nature, to something that's expansive and more abundant when they realize that, hey, this is actually all part of me. This is moving with me, not against me. So those are some three positive things I think people feel when they have an awakening. Is there anything else you can think of?
Yeah. Absence of fear, right? Like those moments of satori, they're categorized by absence of fear. But prior to that, you may have terror happen, because the thing that happens with the ego when there is something greater than itself, is this sense of terror, is this sense of like, I might die. And it will, but it wasn't living to begin with. It's just like an identity. It's like, if you think that you're Mario and Mario dies, who died? There's nobody died, right? So it's like,
Maybe
that's
you can touch in on
absence.
that. Like, this is one of the more popular questions. What is the most difficult phase after spiritual awakening? Like this, like realization of all your old patterns and the dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
So one of the questions is like, why is spiritual awakening so painful?
Yes. It's painful because we're losing something. Like, think about, like, if we're losing something from the point of view of the character, from the point of view of your dream character. It seems like, well, one of the things you're losing is your reference points. And this is very difficult for an ego to navigate, because it is based on reference points. Like, it is based on its positionalities, likes and dislikes, opinions. And when you start to realize that all of that is complete conjecture, it's just like, it's pure imagination. It's just like, it's not even helpful, because it's creating suffering for you. There's this, the big teaching in the Tao is like, the Tao is always this dynamic flow of the now, right? And it's just like, what we do as egos is we make these little assumptions and we try to crystallize them into foreverness. We try to make something that's impermanent permanent, and that is the great suffering that we experience here. And that is why the search for enlightenment is the search for permanence, because when you find the true permanence, then you stop making things that are not permanent into permanence in your mind and causing yourself to suffer. We are suffering because of our broken expectations. So spiritual awakening breaks all expectations in life. All expectations will be broken, because you are actually not who you think you are. Your partner is not who you think they are. The world is not what you think it is. And this is deeply disorienting, unless and until you actually find yourself surrounded by your sangha, by your tribe, by your other awakened beings, because you must actually, since this is the way that consciousness works, like our consciousness is reflected in the world around us. So as you truly begin to have your shift and you embrace it and you accept it, you receive it, you will notice that your world will start to be populated by equal mirrors. And then they will say to you, it's okay. It's all right. We are like you. It's okay. It happened here too. It's safe. It's, and that's what happened to me a lot. It's like that, after that day, if I had not had, by the most random fluke, Eckhart Tolle's book at that point, where he talks about, in The Power of Now, his bench in the park experience, and he's saying the same exact, like, these little points that I'm experiencing, I would have thought I was crazy. Like, I would have thought like something broke in me. Like what, and I think this is what scares people also. And that can be this dark night of the soul of like, I am wrong, because look at mom, look at dad, look at all my friends, look at my wife, look at school, look at society. Nobody's thinking this way. Nobody's seeing this. I must be effed up. There must be something wrong with me. And it collapses in on itself. But if you have this context, this is why, again, in Buddhism, they say so highly, like, taking refuge in the Sangha, which means to take refuge in your spiritual family, in your spiritual friends. because having that experience just gives you this sense of like, oh, it's okay. And you stop resisting, you start unfolding, and you start to finally feel like, oh my God, here's the flow, here's the bliss, here's the beautiful promise, here's the all of those elevated aspects of awakening. And they come when we stop resisting. So I would say that the real dark side of awakening really truly comes only from resistance. It doesn't come from awakening itself. It is simply that we are, through our fear and perceiving it darkly and falsely, we resist it and fight it, deny it and kind of hide from it. And that's what makes it overwhelming, because it is overwhelming. You can't actually fall back asleep all the way. So you'll always have this touchstone. And it's not going to let you rest, which is actually grace also. It's fear's grace. It's like it's there to say, no, this dream is burning down regardless of whether you're going to hold on to it or not, because it wants you to have all of it. It wants you to have your true position of unconditional love, joy, peace, eternal life, all of the good ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, spiritual awakening can definitely be, like you said, overwhelming for many people. And you have to think of what is overwhelming. Well, it can be super uncomfortable when your entire life you've noticed the pixels moving and you're following all the pixels moving in your experience. And then all of a sudden you realize that all these pixels moving are changing. And what you've realized is that what is true is the unchangeable. So you sit back and you start to notice these pixels more. And the farther you move into your spiritual process, the more you can see, the more you can feel, the more you can witness these different pixels changing. And there's like an anxiety in that. This is why like there's an uncomfortableness. This is why people have issues meditating, or if you put them like in a dark retreat or something like that, they're like, what do I do for 24 hours of my day, where normally like 16 of my hours are spent following the pixels that are moving? And so, yeah, it literally is this dark night of the soul where literally you can imagine like a dark retreat. You are now witness to everything. And most people are uncomfortable, specifically in the feelings that are arising in their body, which is why the Vipassana meditation practice is so beneficial for spiritual awakening.
Yes.
So yeah, we've covered why it's painful. We've covered some of the positives of spiritual awakening. Do you think that everybody this is a hard one to answer. Do you think everybody goes through spiritual awakening? I know earlier we talked about it's really grace in the tantric philosophies. It's like, it's not really your choice. It's by the grace of God that you go through spiritual awakenings, or you meet your teacher. But I'm just wondering, like, why do we feel like some people don't go through spiritual awakenings? Can you answer that?
I think it's because of judgment.
Or is it a myth? Sorry, that's another question that might be related.
Or spiritual awakening a myth?
Yeah, I don't know why that's so
it's a myth among those who never experience it. Spiritual awakening is very logical. It's like it's just about getting curious beyond the surface story or narrative of life. And some people spin off into conspiracy theories and astral realm truths. And all of these are just imaginations. Those are not reality. Those are not real awakenings. You're not woke up. It's just because you kind of like
see a blue light in your meditation. That was very common.
That doesn't. I in my work I get to hear people say, hey, you know what? I'm not seeing anything. I want to see something. I want to hear a voice. I'm like, why? What is it that you want? Oh, I want to wake up. No, but that's not necessarily the same thing. If you want to see voices and you want to hear and see voices and lights and things like this, you can go and play in the psychic realm, and you can get mentors that can train you in this, in clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyance. But this is all another aspect of the dream. It's beautiful, and I'm not saying don't experience it. I've had a lot of fascination for it in the past. Now it's like literally I don't feel it anymore. Like I just don't have the desire to reach in there, but and I trust that deeply, but if you have this experience of like, hey, this is so important for me, I want to see a blue light, then that might be part of your journey. That may be something where you need to experience that and maybe see the blue light, or maybe see the heartbreak of never being able to see the blue light after all of your efforts. And that will bring you home. That will kind of say, okay, what else then? So I would definitely, deeply trust your own inner guidance system. At the same time, recognize that what we're talking about is a specific kind of recognition. It's like recognizing, think about this, like when we're dreaming at night, right? When you dream at night, you have this experience of being a character in a world, in relationships to other characters. And it feels all very just like this, doesn't it? It's very real. The storylines, the narratives, the interactions. But who are you really? Like the dream character, if he were to ask, or she, who am I? And then they would look at themselves and say, oh, I am an Atlantean from Nibiru something. Like, oh, amazing. Really though? Because you know who they are. They are you. That character is not, and that character cannot find itself in the dream, right? Doesn't matter where it looks, in the skies, in the seas, in other people, like it cannot find you because you are behind its eyes. You are not in one of the pixels. You are the screen, we may say, a self-aware screen, like Rupert Spira talks about, but you are consciousness. And so consciousness is only conscious of what's in front of it, but that which it is conscious of can't be necessarily, can't find the consciousness, can't find the ground of consciousness. So it's like you are always there in your dream, and we're saying, like, let's find out who and what you really are. What if, just like in sleeping at night, we can take that step back into our awareness and say, what is true? Where is the real one here? If I'm not this body, if I'm not this mind, if I'm not this character, so we're talking about finding that experience. And the answer to that question is an experience. It is not a thought, it is not a concept. It's not, I am an Atlantean, or I am God, or I am anything. It is a ineffable experience that you cannot say anything about it that will actually convey the experience. But it is there, and it's precise. And many people who have had this experience, or even tastes of it, they all share the same thing. They all have the same quality to share. One, all is well. All is well, no matter what it looks like in the world or in your life. It's okay. It's all right. Two is usually something like, love is the ultimate law of life. Love is the foundation of everything that is. Yeah. And then the last one is this incredible sense of connectedness or oneness, feeling this lack and absence of separation, competition, opposition. So these are precise experiences. And so for this, I would say definitely it's not a myth. It is a very scientifically verifiable experience. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And I like everything you said. I agree with that. I'll try to take another slant on why people may be asking this question. So is spiritual awakening a myth? I think what they're trying to ask is, what does it look like after you have a spiritual awakening, right? So some people don't really change. It's like that analogy of like, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water; after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Or the other analogy that you've used a couple of times on previous episodes, where it's like going to the mountain. I don't know the exact analogy. It's like the search. You go to the mountain and then you find it, and then you come back and you're doing the same thing. So it's not like you recognize the dream character, this Atlantean, and then you stop being it. It's this, you can still be who you are, your character, but there's an inner realization, I think, that happens. So that might be why people are like, yeah, is it a myth? Like, is there anything supposed to really change? So
yeah, so this is beautiful. Yeah, the dream goes on. The dream goes on, and to everybody, you look like you are the same exact dream character. When they talk to you, they may get a different response to you than they would had you not had this insight. But at the same time, like,
yeah, that's another myth, right? It's like a lot of people think, oh, after a spiritual awakening, now I'm the good boy, I'm the good girl, I only do good things. And now you've separated the world again into more duality.
Right. The two powers, the good and evil. Like, so we are actually waking up from that. Like, the other aspect that is not necessarily so obvious, but when you realize that which is unchanging, you see that it is one thing. Like, there isn't a good and an evil. There isn't good and bad. There isn't two powers. And this insight also lends itself to all of what is spiritually considered spiritual and good, which is forgiveness, patience, grace, all of these things, mercy, all of these compassion, all of these like spiritual qualities that we may try to get from the bottom up and be like, oh, I'm going to make myself be this way. They are actually intrinsically true. They are part of what is. And when you realize, oh, what is actually, this is myself, just like this hand and this hand are one. They are not the same because clearly I have two hands, but they are one through the way of being my body, right? So even though they are still here and they can touch each other and interact with each other, if they don't realize this oneness, they may feel in competition. But if they realize it, suddenly there's a completely different way to relate to each other. And so this is the underpinning of spiritual awakening, realizing oneness, realizing there is no second power. There's nobody to fight. There's no, but this really goes, again, we did an episode of on good and evil, where we kind of deep dive more into the actual details of this, because this can be like, sometimes it can be triggering because you might see like, oh, clearly this shit that's going on is evil, right? And I understand. And in the dream, yes, but in reality, it's not happening like that. And this is what we're exploring. We're saying, what is reality? How can we possibly see a world where all is well, where we're all connected, where love is the ultimate law?
I love that we've touched on so many different subjects, like the good and evil, or like death. Like a lot of people think that, oh my God, somebody died and it's not good. This is not spirituality. And so, yeah, it's amazing. Let's end with what is the best way to have spiritual awakening? Are there certain steps that one can take? I know we talked about grace, and I mentioned earlier that it's not really up to you. It's really just an unfolding, but maybe if somebody who has never experienced something like this. Oh yeah, one thing I want to touch on is like one of the ways I know that I've had a spiritual awakening before, they've talked about this a lot in the ancient traditions, is the Kundalini awakening. And it can happen in a very subtle or a very gross way, meaning like when I had it, I remember I just learned the practice of meditation. I'd be going to yoga classes for 3 months, and before class, I would sit in meditation. And I think in the 3rd month or something like that, I thought I was in a deep meditation. And then all of a sudden, something just very subtly aligned in my subtle body. And I almost felt like I sat up taller. Everything just aligned. I felt this like downpouring of like bliss and grace and connection to the universe. And you also hear about stories where like great saints were like on the floor like for 2 days, like just shaking. Like, so where I was like with this the experience of
you kind of went back to some like signs of spiritual awakening.
Signs, yeah. But yeah, are there certain steps that one can take if they've never experienced a quote unquote breaking of what they believe to be true?
Yeah. Certainly. I mean, like that's what the whole, slew of spirituality is, all the way from the, Vedic sciences of awakening to all the various traditions, Mayans, Aztecs, the Japanese Zen, and their even more original approach, the Taoist approach, all of this, there's so many approaches that really are ways for you to filter reality. They are giving you different glasses to look through. They're saying, hey, try looking at life like this. Hey, what happens if you keep your body still? It wants to move, doesn't it? So are you in control of your body, or is your body in control of you? I never thought about that. And like, so these things start to basically have you question reality. It's like, that's why Buddha also was saying, hey, question everything, cut it down, really like break it apart. Don't trust me. I want you to have the experience, not to have dogma. Because again, this is the other really important thing we should plug here, because it's to have spiritual understanding intellectually has got nothing to do with at all with spiritual awakening. It can be a helpful map. It can also be the most confusing experience that you set up for yourself, because you think you know it. The ego now says, I am a spiritually awakened being. But what you'll notice, that the telltale sign that has got you is that you're judging people. You're just like sitting there judging people who are not spiritual, or who are not meditating, or who are whatever. So there, you have a fake awakening that got hijacked by the ego.
Very common and very true. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very common. And so to sincerely engage with it is to ask sincere questions and to be vulnerable and willing. Like, I would say the real staples of an accelerated, authentic spiritual journey would be willingness, vulnerability, and like curiosity, authentic, deep curiosity, with this openness to say, I heard there's a thing called enlightenment. Let me discover it. What is this? I think like that, and those, if you really think about those are childlike qualities. Children have those. That's why I think like mystics and children are actually very, very close in consciousness, because we essentially are like, we go back the way we came. It's like we go into, here we are with this incredible soul consciousness. It's contracted into this little body. Okay, now I'm dependent on everything. And it comes out and it's conceited and it's like defensive and it's separate. And then slowly it's like, wait a second, what is really true? And it's kind of like going back to vulnerability, willingness, curiosity. And through that, becoming like little children, as it says also in the scripture, we open ourselves to the father consciousness, to the mother consciousness, to that parent, our source. And we start to receive the things of God. We start to receive, spiritual understanding. So to practice these, to become childlike, not to be conceited, defensive, know that you already know, unwilling and not volunteering to be here in the moment where you are, thinking that you should be somewhere else. Wherever you are, you're always thinking you should be somewhere or something else. That is the confusion that the dream is playing with you. That is the veil. And all you do is you say, no, I'm supposed to be right here. Let me bring these qualities to my present moment: curiosity, willingness, receptivity, right? And study the now. Like, this is it. Like, what's happening now, like within and without. And you will begin to be aware of patterns if you just remain present. And as you become aware of pattern, whatever you are aware of, you are not that, right? Because if I'm aware of my hand, clearly I'm not my hand. So as we become that witness consciousness wakes up, we start to witness ourselves, our patterns, our thoughts, our beliefs, all these structures, all our agreements that were previously unconscious. Suddenly we are no longer identified with them because they are right here, that we are back there still. And now the light can begin to flood in. You're letting go of your whatever you're clutching onto, your sanskaras, your beliefs, your dogmas. And now you can experience the real, in the moment, impartation of wisdom, which life is always dishing out if we are available and receptive to it.
Nice. I like that you took that question and you answered it with qualities. So again, the question was, what is the best way to have a spiritual awakening? And I agree, those qualities are super, super important. I studying the ancient traditions, the tantrics believe that, and again, this is just one belief, I held it to be very true at the start of my journey. It's not the only way, but I think it's quite important for viewers to hear this. So what is the best way to have a spiritual awakening? The tantrics say that you need 3 things. And without these 3 things, it's just, you could be left in a massive confusion. So one is the study of scripture. And you might be like, well, that's scripture. And maybe you come from like a Christian background. You're like, I don't believe in the Bible, blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't know. I'm quite well studied in many scriptures. Boris, you as well. We've learned quite a bit. And I would say each scripture has its like secret codes that can be uncovered. And so 1, you have the study of the scriptures, whatever scripture that is. 2, you have a teacher or somebody that can guide you, because without the teacher who is already well-versed and experienced, maybe they've already had their enlightenment, it's going to be hard for somebody to guide you with just the scriptural knowledge to unlock those secret codes. in India, it's called Shaktipat, right? Somebody has to transmit that energy. The energy of what? Not necessarily the scripture, yes, verbal words, but the energy of what they've been experiencing. So you have scripture, you have a teacher, and then the third one is obviously the most important, which is your own direct experience. So if you have your own direct experience without the other two, then it could be a false experience. And there's just ways that these can mission mash. And without all three, it's probably not the best way to awaken spiritually from the tantric point of view. So
beautiful. And probably in their like teacher slash community, right? Or sangha, so important. The teacher, the teaching, and your soul pod, your spiritual family, not only to support you, but to challenge you and to play the parts of opposition even for you. But in a conscious context of like, we are here waking up, and obviously they're not doing it on purpose, but that they become that kind of relationship between you and your spiritual friends or that spiritual community can be the ground of incredible transformation, also incredible dysfunction, because we can degrade, like we can regress, and like it could spread through an experience of friendship or community where it's like, yeah, we come together for this, and then from the Christian point of view, they would say, oh, Satan attacked it, or something like that. But what it is, it's the ego. Yeah, it's like it's just like the Tower of Babel. I think this. Oh my God, this is just like there's a fresh insight happening for me. But like in the Tower of Babel story, it's like people were trying. They had this goal. They were all coming together. They wanted to like reach up to the heavens, whatever, reach to God. And then suddenly they stopped understanding each other, and they're all speaking different languages, and they don't know what the other person's saying, and so they abandon their project. And I know that there's a negative interpretation, like that God punished them, but I'm here using that allegory in the sense of like, we come together and we have this intention, and then we start to lose our ways. In our communication, we get miscommunication, misunderstanding, and then we experience this conflict, and we let conflict and separation be true. And that can create really powerful dysfunction, which is also then, once again, the ground of our awakening, because that becomes used for us to be able to see what's true, what's not true, to be able to check ourselves, to engage, to or not engage, to speak our truth, or to honor somebody, in giving them our attention. So yeah, I really just want to highlight that's part of like spiritual community, spiritual friendships. Sangha is a priceless.
Yeah, so many beautiful teachers. And yeah, if you do have a guru, or you start off going to, I think most people start their spiritual journey with searching, right? So searching for that teacher, they get insights from the teacher. And when that teacher stops challenging you, you don't have to worry, because you can go home to your partner and realize that they're probably challenging you as well. And then eventually every moment becomes an amazing opportunity to teach you. And what give you that real direct experience? Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to talk about before we end this episode?
I think we covered it. I think maybe just a quick summary of like the spiritual journey. We come into this world as babies. We are trained into complete dependency. Most of us have gone through schools, colleges, where we are further and further trained to look outside for answers, to look outside for authority, outside for meaning. And so that is not a problem, and not something that shouldn't have happened. That is very similar to how a chick is born inside of an egg, or the caterpillar goes inside of a chrysalis. It is that which forms our something to push against. And as we do, we find the true. We find like, what am I really about? First as a character, and then we start to suspect, wait a minute, maybe there's something higher. We hear of something like enlightenment, and we say, oh, what is it? And we begin our search for, what is that eternal aspect of myself? What is that it can be truly depended on, no matter what doesn't come and go? And as we open to this question, and we begin to bring not only our analytical qualities, but also our childlike qualities, our willingness, our vulnerability, our openness to listen. Now, not necessarily to a higher authority from the outside, but listen within and say, well, what is it? I want, in that sense of contemplation, receiving, and curiosity, right? That innocent kind of curiosity of like wanting to know, hey, what is that? But now we don't ask our teachers, preachers, parents. Now we ask consciousness itself, hey, what is that? And we start to receive the impartations from within in our own unique ways. For some people, maybe it's a blue light. For other people, maybe it's a voice. But in many cases, it's something very natural, something that doesn't make you feel like, wait, what is that? That was so weird. But something that is very already feels familiar and true to you. So that's the spiritual journey, the journey of spiritual awakening. And it's something that we're all on. We're just not all aware that we are on this journey. And one thing that we can also bring to it is compassion for everybody, knowing like everybody is doing their best, even the psychopaths, narcissists, all of those people that you think are like not, they are on their own journey. They're learning through their own unique curriculum. And this really becomes very obvious the more that we take on our unique curriculum. So that is it, I'd say, in summary.
Beautiful.
Is anything to add to that one?
No, I just want to wish you guys all the best in your spiritual journey. May you all find that ineffable kind of like unchangeable space. They call it the subtlest of the subtle. So may you search for that and realize your true nature. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate you, Boris. Take care. We will see you guys next time. Bye. Bye.